She also received the TIAA-CREF Institute's 2013 Theodore M. Hesberg Award for Leadership Excellence and was elected chair of the Board of Directors of the American Council on Education. In 2015, Dr. Natalicio received the prestigious Carnegie Corporation of New York's Academic Leadership Award for demonstrating vision and outstanding commitment to excellence and equity in undergraduate education. A graduate of St. Louis University, Dr. Natalicio earned a master's degree in Portuguese and a doctorate in linguistics from the University of Texas in Austin. Julian Castro, Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, recently wrote of Dr. Natalicio, "Brain power is the new currency of success in the 21st century global economy. And that currency is even more precious and sadly elusive for far too many first-generation low-income college students. No one understands this better than Diana Natalicio. As president of the University of Texas at El Paso for nearly 3 decades, she has done a masterful job of shaping her school to the surrounding community, not the other way around. Ahead of her time, seeing the future of America in the faces of her students." So on a personal, for those of you who love to come take selfies with her, let them know who you are. Let her know your struggles. Let her know your story. She carries those stories of our students with her every time she's asked to present all over the nation. And it's not enough to say, let me take a picture with you, but let me tell you my story and everything she's done for us to be a leading institution. Thank you.
My glasses, my hair. Okay.
So Dr. Natalicio, every time she gets an award, she always says humbly, I can't get this award by myself. I can't receive this without recognizing the contributions of everyone here. So everyone who's worked so hard to make UTEP what it is, thank you. The students, the future's in your hands. Continue to carry the name of UTEP forward with lots of pride and orgullo. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. I always feel uncomfortable with these introductions, these long introductions, because I do have some discomfort in being recognized constantly for the achievements of others. This kind of personal celebrity isn't my style, and so I find it a little bit uncomfortable. I also find it just so odd to be on a list with the Pope, the manager of, not the manager, the owner of the Chicago Cubs, because I'm a Cardinals fan, and Shakira's on that list too. Now, if you can find a unifying principle there, let me know. I'd like to know what that might be. I wanted to reflect on a little bit on our history because I think the history of this institution is so interesting. We were founded as a mining school, as the State School of Mines and Metallurgy, and we had 2 programs, mining engineering and geology, and it was an all-male initial student population. Not surprisingly, because women typically don't go into mining, engineering, and geology, or at least they didn't in 1914. 2 years later, what we celebrate now is the 100th anniversary of women becoming a part of this university, was a response to a request from families in this region who had daughters who wanted to pursue higher education and who weren't particularly interested in becoming geologists or mining engineers, but the school really didn't offer liberal arts classes or anything like that. So we had to change as an institution. 2 years after we came out of the chute, we had to change. We also had to move because fire burned down our school over there near Fort Bliss because the chemists set their laboratory on fire. And that was probably another reason why they thought maybe having more women on the campus would be a good idea. In any case, we moved our campus. We built the first building in 1917. Quinn Hall, Old Main, those are the first buildings that we built. And we introduced liberal arts courses. Then there was a junior college in this community a little bit later that prepared teachers. It was a 2-year teacher preparation program, and we made a decision after we had introduced liberal arts courses and were offering them to merge with that junior college, and we formed the College of Mines and Metallurgy, which then offered degrees, actual degrees, in liberal arts areas. And so we began to prepare teachers. So our institution really responded to the needs of this region right from the beginning. First as a mining school in response to the industrial needs, and then the need for other professionals to provide educational opportunities for people who want to be teachers and do other things. So this institution and the arrival of women on the campus, women students on the campus, was really very important. You're going to be introduced to a beautiful book, a volume that Dr. Nunez-Mchidi and Dr. Donna Eckel did, edited and pulled together. She's holding it up right there. And at noon, I believe, we're going to have the book introduction. And it tells the stories, chapter by chapter, of women who played a role in the history of this institution. Students, faculty, staff members, and the chapters were written by people on this campus who either knew these people or did some research about them and contributed their chapters to the book. I think what you'll find in reading those chapters is the diversity of women and their contributions to the development of the institution. And so we have, for example, in the earliest of times, we have the wife of the first dean of the School of Mines, Kathleen Worrell, who was given credit for having the inspiration to build our buildings on this campus site in the Bhutanese style. She read a National Geographic article, the rumor is, the story goes, about this hidden kingdom in the Himalaya, and she decided that she would envision a campus whose buildings looked like the buildings she saw in that photo essay in National Geographic, because the mountain looked to her like this mountain here. Now, this mountain here is a little shorter than the Himalayas. But if you come from East Texas, which she did, it looked really tall, this mountain here. So Kathleen Worrell is credited with our architecture, and we've stuck with it. It was such a good idea that we stuck with it. And our campus now is known as one of the most beautiful campuses anywhere, and it really is. And one of the reasons for that is that our architecture is coherent. It's tranquil, it's calm, it's not cacophonous with every new style for every decade where architects make their statements, but nothing fits together. And so we're very proud of Kathleen Worrell's tradition. We also had early staff members, people who were excited about this campus, and they did all kinds of things like design the first seal. A woman named Ruth Auger, who was our registrar, and she designed our seal, the original seal of the university. She was a classically trained artist and a musician, and so she played a role in creating our brand and our image. She directed the first play that was ever performed on the campus. She did all these things and did them quite unrecognized. I mean, she just did them because we needed a seal. Okay, so she made a seal. But she was also our registrar. As you can imagine, being a registrar in those days with 27 students wasn't a real heavy burden. So she could, even though she didn't have much technology, so she had time to design a seal and some other things. Thelma White, I think we all know about Thelma White. She brought a lawsuit. She wanted to come into UTEP. She was the first African-American woman to want to come to UTEP. and she in 1955, and we were subject to Texas law, which said that we could not admit African Americans to undergraduate programs. The only African Americans were admitted to graduate programs at the University of Texas at Austin. So she sued the Board of Regents, and meantime went and enrolled at New Mexico State because New Mexico didn't have a similar rule. And she won her lawsuit, leading to the desegregation of all public universities in Texas. So Thelma White, right here in El Paso, had a huge impact on kind of the demographics of Texas higher education. There were others. Patricia McCormick. Patricia McCormick was a student, and she told her parents when she came to Texas Western in 1951 that she was going to study art. But what she really did was to go over to Juarez and study bullfighting. Okay? And she became the first and most noted matadora in the world, Patricia McCormick. There have been stories written about her. Now she kind of reminds me of my own mother. My mom wanted to go to college. She finished high school in St. Louis, and my mom was the eldest of 3 children. She had 2 younger brothers. And my grandfather, not a very enlightened fellow, I think, told her that she couldn't attend college because she was a girl and girls weren't supposed to go to college. And so he was saving his money to send her next eldest sibling, her brother, to engineering school, which he did. My mom said, well, okay, you're not going to let me go to college, then I'm going to figure out another career. And so she joined a vaudeville troupe, okay? And my mom was a dancer. She'd always been a dancer, a very good one. And she signed up to travel with a group that went all over the Middle West on the train. They went to Cincinnati, and they went to Chicago, and they came to San Antonio. And there was a group of 16 women, young women, who danced, tap danced, and did, ethnic dances. There's a photograph of her with buckets hanging from her shoulders, on this kind of Dutch, the fantasy of what Dutch dancers used to do. I doubt anybody danced much with buckets on their shoulders, but my mom did. And so she traveled for about 8 years. And in this troupe was a magician, a guy with a monkey, a soprano, a couple that did ballroom dancing, just all kinds of entertainment. And they would go from city to city and perform these shows. And she just had a great life. She just loved it. And she became fast friends all of her life with the other women that she danced with. And it was really a very exciting career. And then she decided to stop traveling, and she married my dad and settled down. But then she became quite a political activist, and so she was very active in the League of Women Voters in St. Louis and so on. So I sometimes think that my own spunk comes from my mom. If I hadn't become UTEP's president, maybe I'd be out somewhere dancing. You never know. You never know what I might have done. So the point here is that everybody finds a pathway. Everybody finds their own pathway if they're going to be happy. And that's what we all have to do. We all have to find our pathway. And for me, coming to UTEP, finding UTEP, was really a stroke of great, great good fortune. Because it turns out that this setting and this mission here were so perfectly aligned, unbeknownst to me, so perfectly aligned with who I was and what I hoped to be able to do in higher education. And I consider myself so fortunate to have been able to find this. So let me talk a little bit about that. I came here in 1971 as a faculty member, but I was a trailing spouse. What that meant was I was married to someone who was offered a position in the College of Education, a tenured position in educational psychology and counseling. And he said, okay, look, but I got this wife, and she's got a doctorate in linguistics. What about her? And so it happened that someone in the languages and linguistics, there were two separate departments, and this fellow had been teaching in both, was going on leave that year. And so they said, okay, you can be visiting assistant professor of languages and linguistics. So we came. We had two job offers. We were looking for two academic jobs, which in 1971 wasn't so easy to do. And so we had two choices. One was Staten Island and in New York, and the other one was El Paso. I mean, it couldn't be more different, right? And so, I don't know, we were in Austin, so we thought, well, let's just go to El Paso. And we were going to stay 1 year. That was it. So he got his tenured faculty position, and I became a visiting assistant professor of languages and linguistics, which meant that I was appointed in two different departments. So I had one foot in languages and the modern languages department, the other in linguistics. For a visiting assistant professor to have one foot in two departments, that's about as tenuous a hold on a position as you might have, because you're visiting, you're in two different departments, nobody really feels that you're part of them because you've got this half-time commitment. And so I didn't really think that I had much of a future here. Well, the climate in the department at that time was also interesting. The linguistics faculty, oddly, in that year, 1971, had two female faculty members at a professorial rank, which is pretty unusual. And so that was good. But the languages department was at war with itself. I didn't know that, but you had Russian and German and French and Spanish, and everybody was kind of not getting along. And so I kind of spent my time with the linguistics department and with my students, whom I loved. And I loved my students because I had come from UT Austin, where students were a little bit more entitled. And they felt to me like they were always testing me or challenging me to entertain them, make it more interesting, whatever. When I got here, the students were just so earnest and hardworking and wanting to succeed and trying very hard and so talented and so modest, so unentitled. And it was wonderful to be with them and to be able to work with them. And so I got very involved in my teaching and loved the classes and loved working with the students. And it was right then that I realized that there was a big difference. You could teach at a university that might be thought of as very prestigious, but it might not be the best place to do education. It might not be the best place to teach because the students aren't nearly as receptive. The students aren't nearly as aware of the opportunity that the institution presents to them. They take it for granted. And having been the first in my family to go to college, I really understood the power of education and how important it was for students that I worked with to feel that same passion about education, because it offended me, frankly, for students not to respect the opportunity that higher education represents. And so, for me, teaching here was just so much more attractive than teaching in Austin. And I couldn't understand why many people at that time on the faculty would talk about UTEP in somewhat disparaging terms. We were always kind of whining about the fact we weren't Austin, and we didn't have resources, and we weren't politically connected, and all the rest of it. And I kept thinking, gosh, I think quite the opposite. I think it's terrific that we have our own identity, that we have our own place, that nobody bothers us, and we can get our work done in a way that is truly authentic and effective. And so I couldn't understand why people were sort of self-deprecating and so on. Some of you may remember, if you're as old as I, few people are these days on campus, but we had bumper stickers that said Harvard on the border. And that was Harvard standards, but because Harvard doesn't have a clue how to educate first generation low-income students. That's not their business. And so it was really important to me that I had this epiphany about higher ed that was really different in different places. And that prestige and brand weren't everything, at least not for me. They may be for some people, but it wasn't for me. So we decided that we would stay a while, a little longer. And so we moved to a house in the Upper Valley. I made myself a vegetable garden, which I'd always wanted to do. And I was really good at growing vegetables. The valley soil was fertile, and I was a hard-working farmer, and so I got a lot done. Well, it turned out that 2 years later, I got a tenure track position in the languages department and the linguistics department, again, in 2 departments. So I was in the tenure track. I moved from visiting to tenure track. That was a big step. And then, much to my surprise, 1 year after that, I was invited to serve as chair of the languages department. It was like, chair of the department? Me? I don't have any administrative aspirations or skills. I just want to do my research and my teaching. Why do you want me to be chair of the department? And the answer was, well, this languages department is at war with itself. I told you that already. And neither faction will allow anybody from the other faction to be the chair. So you're the compromised choice because nobody knows you very well and you're out there farming all the time, so they don't see you. And so I said, well, I don't think I can do that. I don't have any idea how to be a department chair. And they said, well, you'll learn. It's not that hard. So I said, okay, I'll give it my best. And so I went into the department chair job, replacing someone who had gone on leave on a Fulbright to Romania. So it was a 1-year deal, and I thought, okay, not a big problem. I can't do that much damage in a year, right? So I began to be the department chair, and I'll never forget, just certain memories stick with you. There was a male, very senior male faculty member who was not happy that I was the department chair. And I remember in a faculty meeting I used 2 words. One was input and the other was feedback, which I guess in 1971 were fairly edgy terms. I don't really know. And he shook his finger at me, I'll never forget this, in the meeting, and he said, don't you ever use that California language with me. And I'm thinking, California? I've never even been to California. I don't know what you're talking about. So anyway, we kind of stumbled through that year, and I did make some friends because I was so good at growing kale that every day I would bring a huge grocery bag full of kale to the department, and I'd place it outside the door of the departmental office, and I would make it available to anyone who wanted kale. Now, in today's market, I would have sold it, right, because kale is very popular. Nobody wanted kale, so it would sit there and wilt, but every day I would bring in a new bag because I wanted to share my bountiful crop. I didn't like kale that much either, but it grew very well in the Upper Valley. So my departmental duties then unexpectedly extended because the colleague who had gone on leave to Romania went on medical leave. And so I stayed in the position. And by that time, I was secretly beginning to like being department chair. Now, I didn't tell anybody this because faculty aren't supposed to like being administrators, or at least that's how we talk about it a lot, that it's really not work for very smart and talented people. It's more the faculty who can't succeed doing their research or whatever else it might be, end up being department chairs or deans or presidents. That's what happens to them. And so I didn't let anybody know that I liked it, but I began to understand an important concept, which is that when you're in an administrative position, you can actually make some things happen that you can't when you're not in an administrative position. You've got control, a little bit, over things like class schedule or budget. Not much money, we never had very much, but you could make decisions that would have kind of an impact that as a faculty member you couldn't do. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. I mean, I kind of like this idea that we can actually shape what we're doing through these very limited resources of time and money, because those are the two things that mean the most to most people. And so if you can work with faculty on giving them a schedule that might work better for them, or you can help students by scheduling classes at times when working people can come and so on, you really can help people and help them succeed in achieving their goals. That's very exciting stuff. Coupling that with living in this binational El Paso Juarez community, and in those days, you could drive back and forth in an instant. You could go to lunch and come back with no delay at all. And so we went constantly across the bridge to eat lunch or to go to the market or do whatever, visit friends, do whatever we wanted to do. And the idea of living in two countries at the same time, the idea of having this job that I could actually make a difference, a little bit of a difference in somebody's life, in addition to teaching them, which was very rewarding and I knew was making a difference as well. And my farm, I was really happy. I was very, very happy. And so we decided we would stay here. And then I was very fortunate to be invited by the then Dean of Liberal Arts to be Associate Dean. Wasn't sure about that because I realized that I was moving further away from students. Because what happens in administration, right, is that you're in a department, you're seeing students every day because you're working with them directly. And then you move into the dean's office. Often what you do see is problem issues that you have to resolve, but you don't get to kind of breathe that success. And for me, student success, and Gina got it exactly right, I love to hear student stories of success because that's what feeds my energy. It's just wonderful to hear. You've got 24,000 students and everybody's succeeding, right? Everybody is succeeding at something. It's phenomenal. I mean, it's just you're surrounded by success. My brother is a social worker, or was, retired now in St. Louis and worked a lot with homeless people and so on. And that work is really, really tough because you deal with a lot of disappointment and failure, right? It's just really rough. He's a very optimistic guy, so he handled it very well. But I always used to tell him, I'm in the success business. Every day I'm just bombarded with success. And you get addicted to success. It's wonderful. Success is great. And to be a really effective administrator, I think, or to be a happy administrator, you've got to get vicarious pleasure from other people's success. It's not about me. It's about other people's success. Because that can be so much greater than anything I can do by myself that I'm just joyful all the time walking around thinking about the success that happens every single day on this campus. I just ran into a student downstairs whom I'd never met before, but we did take a selfie. I was waiting for the elevator, and she told me she'd just gotten word that she passed her Spanish test, which means that she doesn't have to take 2 courses. I guess it's a placement test of some kind. She was this far off the ground. She was so happy. Well, I felt really good about that too. I rode that elevator almost without power. Came right on up. So, that's what being an administrator in a university, I think, is all about. If you can't enjoy that, then you shouldn't do the job. And I have a lot of colleagues who just don't seem to feel the same way. And it always makes me sad because they're missing the best part, right? They're missing the best part. And that is to be able to facilitate things so people can be more successful and then to jump up and down when they're successful. I mean, it's pretty simple. So I obviously, then after I got into the dean's office, I served as Dean of Liberal Arts, and that took me another step away. I was still saying to my colleagues, my faculty colleagues, that this was only a temporary gig, that I really wasn't all that keen about administration, because truly there was something almost embarrassing about wanting to be an administrator. It was not considered to be proper or serious, or it was considered to be a default choice. But I liked it. And after a while, I finally began to admit it. And even to myself. I think the first person I had to convince about all that was me. And so, I moved on to the dean's office, and that was always very, very interesting, because the College of Liberal Arts is a big, big college and has wonderful programs, arts programs, and you're surrounded again by all sorts of talented people in music and art, theater and dance, and then all of the social and behavioral sciences and the humanities, and I mean every day of the week there's something going on, and something that you can attend, and something that you can celebrate. And so it was really wonderful. After that came the Vice President for Academic Affairs, and that moved me not only out of the immediate area of a department or a faculty, but it moved me outside of an academic building. It moved me to the administration building. And each one of those steps was a step away from the action, if you will, of the campus. And so I felt it was really important always to participate actively in the life of the campus. And so I go to a lot of events. I show up in places where people don't expect, not only because I want them to know that I, as president of the university, care about these things, but because I get an enormous energy boost from doing it. For me, it's therapeutic, it's healthy to be out there seeing firsthand what students and faculty and staff are doing, and talking with people and getting ground truth. One of the great great dangers of being an administrator is you lose contact with people, because you begin to insulate yourself, and sometimes your staff inadvertently tries to protect you and insulates you so that you really don't know what's happening. But by the time I got into the administration building, I was long enough on campus that I knew almost everybody. I didn't parachute in from someplace else. I knew everybody. And so I was able to maintain those kinds of contacts. And I certainly try, even now, even though I travel a lot more and do a lot of external things, I still try very, very hard to attend as many events and activities as I can. The final step, becoming president, was far more intentional and thoughtful than any of the others. The others opened up, it was an opportunity, I was asked if I was interested, and I said, well, sure, if I have this much impact here, I think I can probably have a little more there, I'll go for it. And I loved being at UTEP, and by that time I was definitely still here. So that was the presidency, and I was Vice President for Academic Affairs, and I announced initially, I was asked if I wanted to be interim president because my predecessor was going off to Missouri. And I said yes, and I made clear that I wasn't interested in becoming president at that time. I was 3 years into being vice president. And I had a 5-year plan for what I was going to do in the vice president's office. And I thought, well, I'm not through. So I'm just not going to vie for this, because this needs to get done. Well, then I realized something obvious but not immediately, and that was that if a president came in who didn't buy into the vision that I had, then my 5-year plan was not going to work anyway, right? I was probably not even going to be vice president. So what was the point? So I decided that I would vie for that position. Well, this was a pretty big step, because this involved being selected by the Board of Regents and all the rest of that stuff. So I was really stepping out there. And like I think all of us, I had some reservations about how well prepared I was for the job. But I decided I would go for it. I had no idea totally what it meant to be president of the university. But once I got into the candidacy and I saw the competition, I realized, well, I'm not sure what I was so worried about here. This isn't such a big step after all. And that was very reinforcing, very confidence building. I have to say that all along in this trajectory, I was building confidence. But I didn't start with very much confidence because I was first in my family to go to college, and I went to a university that I could get to on the bus. That was St. Louis University. I could choose between two in St. Louis at the time. When I graduated from high school, very, very poor high school, I might add. There were two private schools in St. Louis University and Washington University. There were no public universities. Think about that, in St. Louis when I went to college. Today there's, of course, University of Missouri St. Louis, there's University of Missouri Kansas City, a lot of different public universities, but in those days there were only two and they were private. The public university was in Columbia, the capital of Missouri. That's the way many states did it. Austin, the flagship in Austin, the capital, that's the way they designed it. And if we hadn't had mining here, we probably wouldn't have had a branch of the University of Texas for a long, long time. There wouldn't have been a reason for it, but mining that's what our ace in the hole was. But I had no confidence when I went to St. Louis University because most of the boys who were enrolled at St. Louis University had gone to the prep school, St. Louis University prep school, so they were already Jesuit educated. I wasn't. I had no idea who Dante was. They'd talk about Dante, and I'd sit there and think, I wonder who that is. And I had to go and read stuff because I was clueless. There were so many things I hadn't done or learned, and that was a real problem for me. So that made me much better able to resonate to our students here in the insecurity and lack of confidence that they often feel, because I was there once. During the time that I became a faculty member and administrator, I built my confidence. But I wasn't still. Even in public speaking, for example, I was a little uneasy about even giving a welcome. And I tell students all the time, practice speaking in public as much as you can because it's such an important skill. And I was afraid to speak in public. When I was Dean of Liberal Arts, I used to write out a welcome to UTEP. And why did I write it? Because I thought I was going to forget. When I got up to the podium that I wouldn't remember what I was doing there and what I was supposed to say. And that was just my insecurity as a public speaker. So going up for the president's job, knowing that there was a lot of speaking involved, this was a big step for me. There were still areas where I had to grow, and I knew that. So I interviewed for the position, and I was fortunate that I got the job. And I think I got the job because the 4 candidates who were in the pool besides me, we were 5, were all male, and they were all from other places, other universities. And the thing that I think came through to the regents and to the chancellor and everybody else who was involved in the decision was I really knew this school well, and I was very passionate about what needed to be done here. And I came across as able to hit the ground running and do something and do it well. They trusted that. They took a big risk, frankly. They took a big risk, but they took it. There were no other women presidents in the University of Texas system. And to this day, there's only been one other. That was Dr. Juliet Garcia from Brownsville. And she was president during a certain period of time, during the time that I've been president. So we were 2 out of 14 institutions in the UT system. And I say this in the introduction to the book that Gina and Donna did. That's pretty hard to believe in 2017. Breaking news is that they've just selected a president at Permian Basin, so there will again be 2 female presidents in the UT system. But again, 2 out of 14 seems to be a relatively small number when you consider everything else. So when I was appointed president, I began to then realize the full power of what I had understood earlier in terms of managing resources and setting priorities and being able to have an impact, because the president's office obviously has far more of that than other places. But it was very interesting to become president of UTEP and to get some of the reactions that occurred when my appointment was announced. I mentioned one of them in the book, in the introduction to the book, which is that I was walking in Cloudcroft. I'm a hiker and have always loved walking. And so I did a lot of walking in the mountains, and I was in Cloudcroft, and there was a gentleman from El Paso whom I'd seen. I didn't know who he was. And we used to say hello if we encountered each other walking. And he called me little lady. And so he said, "Hi, little lady, how are things going in El Paso?" And I would always say, "Fine." And on this occasion, he said, "Hi, little lady, how are things going in El Paso?" And I said, "Fine." And he said, "Will that woman ever be able to manage an athletic department?" Because he'd read the paper that a woman had been appointed UTEP's president. He just didn't know it was me. So I told him, "I'm sure she will." There was also wild speculation about whether I would live in the Hoover House. For some reason, the assumption was because I didn't have a family that I wouldn't live in the Hoover House, that I would choose not to. And I found that really surprising. I mean, I never understood quite what all that was, except kind of a predisposition that it was a house, and it was a big house, and there ought to be a big family in there. And the Monroes had lived there, and they had 3 children, and so I think the model was just that. So when I said I was moving in, everyone was shocked. You know, not everyone, but many of the people in my neighborhood were surprised. And just all sorts of things like that occur, you know, where people are disarmed by the kinds of things that you embody by being somewhat different from your predecessors. So people now ask me, what puzzles them about me now is, why did you stay at UTEP for your whole career? Because that's a really unusual thing to do. The tenure of most presidents averages around 5 years. Most university presidents do not stay in one place. That's very typical. And a lot of people, nationally, all the time I get this question, well, why did you stay at UTEP? And I always tell them, well, you know, when you find the right place where there's alignment between who you are and whom you serve, why would you change? Why would you go for prestige or for money, whatever it might be? If satisfaction is important to you, do what you think is right. Do what you think will make you happy. And if it's not money and it's not prestige, but it's the satisfaction of knowing that an institution can serve a population that historically has been underserved, and if that's what turns you on or drives your passion or your energy, why wouldn't you stay? And most people, when you put it that way, find it puzzling, because I think, unfortunately, in moving and using institutions as stepping stones, which is what happens in higher ed, people don't make a kind of an emotional commitment or a kind of deep-seated commitment. They simply have a job as a president for a certain period of time. And so if I leave you with anything, it would be that whatever it is that you do, believe in it. If you don't, then you need to do something else, because You will not be ultimately happy, content. You won't realize your full potential if you don't find that place that fits you the way UTEP has fit me. I feel that I would have done far less well in my own eyes, but I think even objectively, if I had tried to go for values that aren't truly important to me, like money. I could earn a lot more at many institutions, and my private institution president colleagues always tell me, you could make 5 times as much money at this private school. And I say, yeah, but I wouldn't like the students as much. That makes a difference. Well, it wouldn't. And so what we try to do then, or what we should try to do ourselves, is to find that alignment and then to make it work, and to make it work to the best of our ability. You get a great head start on that success if there's good alignment. If there's not good alignment, you've got to work much harder at it, right? And so I think that's a real lesson. Now, I've had so many experiences as UTEP's president that are extraordinary. I mean, things that, growing up in St. Louis, first in my family to go to college, and struggling through my undergraduate years, working half-time and so on, never imagined that I would do some of the things that I ended up doing. So I went, for example, to the South Pole. And not very many people get to go to the South Pole, but I was appointed to the National Science Board, and as part of my duties on the board, I had an opportunity to go to the South Pole. And it was an incredible journey, incredible. And when I was standing at the South Pole, I looked at the ceremonial globe, silver globe that's there, that marks the South Pole. Did you know that the South Pole is 9,000 feet high? It's the same altitude as Cloudcroft is on this continent. And it's all ice, 9,000 feet of ice on top of a desert. That's what Antarctica is, a desert. But it's covered with ice, 9,000 feet of it. And so the South Pole is high, just like Cloudcroft, so you have to expend more energy to move your body forward, and your body is covered with a lot of heavy stuff because it's cold. It's 40 below zero, and you've got parkas and big boots and all that stuff. So you're standing there, you're looking at this big globe that is the ceremonial South Pole, surrounded by all the flags of the treaty nations, because Antarctica is divided up into slices for all the nations. England and Norway and Russia, and everybody's got a piece of Antarctica, and their flags are all there. So you're standing there looking at yourself in this silver globe and your parka and all that. And my mind went back to when I was a little girl in St. Louis, and I had a room in our house, and I studied there in my room on a desk that my dad had somehow configured. And my parents had bought me a globe. It was a little globe. And on the bottom of the globe was this white blob, right? Well, that was Antarctica, right? And when I was in like the 3rd grade, I used to think that if you tried to go to that place, you'd fall off. Okay? I wasn't great in science. And so I was standing there, and of all the things that I could think of was that globe. And I'm not falling off, you know, I'm here, I'm grounded. And so I had these experiences that were truly transformational. I mean, for me, just amazing experiences. And I tell our students all the time, I didn't get to go to Antarctica. I didn't get to go to a coronation of a king in Bhutan. I didn't get to go to John D. Rockefeller's home and have dinner in New York. I didn't get to do those things because I amassed huge wealth and bought those experiences. I got to do all of that, including living in the Hoover House, because I got an education and people invited me to do these things. I didn't have to buy them. education is what opens the doors to all of these kinds of opportunities. And that's why the business that we're in, each and every one of us, whatever your role on the campus, is so important. It's just so tremendously important. So on behalf of all of our students, I just want to thank all the women on the campus who are celebrating today this 100th anniversary. I want to thank you for what you represent to all of the young women on this campus, our students, because you're their role models every single day. What you do, if you think for a minute that they're not paying attention, you got it wrong. They're paying attention all the time. They're watching what you do, how you dress, what you say. They're constantly absorbing, like sponges, just absorbing what they see you doing. Because for many of them, you are the professional role model in their lives. And so it is extremely important, I think, that you all recognize just what an important role you play. Not only in the jobs that you do and the things that you contribute to the university's well-being overall, but what you represent as models and as professional women. I want to thank you for all of that. I want to thank you all for listening today. And I want to thank again, especially Gina and Donna and everybody else involved in organizing this event for giving us all the opportunity to celebrate this milestone in our history and to come together to celebrate the great, great university that we are today. Thank you so much.
The Women's Honor Society and the faculty and affiliates. There's several of you in the audience. Would you please stand up if you teach with women in gender studies? Would you please stand? This is an interdisciplinary program. We want to thank you for teaching with us. Josie, you teach La Chicana. Stand up. Rita, Irma, Ruth, Jane, anyone who's taught with us. Sarah, thank you very much. This program exists because women believed that we need to know about women in history and literature and the humanities and the sciences and the social sciences. So I want to thank everybody for helping to make this program such a success. And we know that this time in history, more than any time, we have our classes filling because women want to know our stories. And we know the power of story and how it moves us and it touches us. And it's not always how much you make, but the impact that we're willing to make in our lives. So Dr. Maisa Kati, Victoria Martinez, who's not here, co-chairs of today's program, and on behalf of Triota, we'd like to give you a certificate of appreciation and also a beautiful Frida Kahlo print. We also have our Dean, Dean Witherspoon. Would you please come up? They work here. It's not so much the certificate, but all the meaning that gets beyond what we can compile and give to you. And so Dean Witherspoon, this is her last year. Thank you, but this is a print that both of you have with Frida Kahlo. And for us as Chicanas, they say, what's up with Chicanas and Frida? But I interviewed my mother one day and I said, Mom, how did your generation remember her? And she says, we call her Frida la Sufrida. What woman hasn't suffered, right? We've overcome a lot of challenges. We continue to be questioned for everything we do and critiqued at every level. But it's worth it because we have a lot to do. So, ayúdenos or step aside porque ahí venimos a hacer.